person who vowed to love you forever became the very reason you never saw another tomorrow. Dorothy Stratten was living the dream. From a small-town Dairy Queen to the glittering heights of Hollywood, her rise was nothing short of a modern fairy tale. As Playboy's Playmate of the Year and an emerging actress, she seemed destined for greatness. But behind every flash of the camera, a darker story brewed. One filled with obsession, control, and the chilling realization that sometimes the greatest danger lies with those closest to us. Paul Snider, her husband, had been there from the start. He was the man who discovered her, pushed her into the limelight, and watched her star rise. But as Dorothy's fame grew, so did Paul's insecurity. What started as love quickly morphed into possession. He called constantly, monitored her every move, and became increasingly erratic. Dorothy knew something was wrong. She confided in friends, whispered fears of what might happen if she tried to leave. She even uttered the haunting words, "I didn't see a way out." On a quiet August afternoon in Los Angeles, Dorothy walked into the modest home she once shared with Paul. It was supposed to be a civil meeting, a chance to discuss the end of their marriage. But when the door closed behind her, it also shut out every opportunity to escape. Hours later, the silence was broken by the grim discovery of her lifeless body. The world lost a rising star, but for those who knew her, the tragedy went far deeper. What led a man to turn from protector to predator? And could this devastating end have been prevented? Welcome to True Crime Acts, where we look into the hidden truths behind some of the most chilling real-life events. Our mission is to uncover the stories that shock, educate, and spark change, reminding us that behind every headline is a victim, a family, and a ripple effect felt by an entire community. If you find this journey as important as we do, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to ensure you never miss another gripping exploration into the depths of human behavior. Dorothy Stratten's story began in Vancouver, Canada, where she was born Dorothy Ruth Hoog Stratten on February 28, 1960. From a young age, Dorothy radiated a quiet charm that hinted at a future far brighter than the modest life she led. Working at a Dairy Queen, Dorothy spent her days serving ice cream and daydreaming of something more. She had a natural beauty, ethereal, almost otherworldly, that turned heads wherever she went. Little did she know that this beauty, the very gift that would open doors to fame, would also become a doorway to danger. Her life took a pivotal turn when Paul Snider walked into the Dairy Queen. Snider, a promoter with a dubious reputation, saw in Dorothy not just beauty but potential, a gold mine. He wooed her with promises of stardom, filling her head with dreams of Hollywood lights and red carpets. Dorothy, young and naive, found herself drawn to Snider's confidence and vision. When he proposed sending her photographs to Playboy, Dorothy hesitated but ultimately agreed, trusting Snider's instincts over her own. Playboy saw in Dorothy what Snider had seen, an undeniable allure. She was soon invited to Los Angeles, where her fresh-faced innocence set her apart in a world of manufactured glamour. Hugh Hefner himself recognized her potential, and Dorothy quickly rose through the ranks, becoming Playmate of the Month in August 1979 and Playmate of the Year in 1980. But behind the smiles and the flashing cameras, a storm was brewing. Paul Snider, who had once been her gateway to success, began to feel the bitter sting of jealousy. As Dorothy's star rose, his own prospects faded, leaving him a shadow in her spotlight. His admiration twisted into obsession, and his pride turned into a dangerous need to control the very person he had helped create. Would Dorothy realize the danger before it was too late, or was she already ensnared in a web woven too tightly to escape? Paul Snider's life was a far cry from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. Born in Vancouver, Snider had built his reputation as a promoter, but not the kind associated with A-list events. He was a hustler, his name whispered in connection with shady deals and seedy nightclubs. When he met Dorothy, he saw more than just beauty. He saw an escape route, a way to rise above his circumstances. Initially, Snider basked in Dorothy's success. He paraded her around as his discovery, taking credit for every accolade she received. But as Dorothy transitioned from being Snider's girl to Hollywood's rising star, something inside him snapped. The more she shined, the more invisible he became. His jealousy festered, and soon admiration soured into a sinister possessiveness. Dorothy's growing independence became a threat. She was gaining roles in movies, mingling with influential people, and forging her own path. Her involvement with director Peter Bogdanovich during the filming of They All Laughed only deepened Snider's insecurity. He saw Bogdanovich not just as a romantic rival, but as someone stealing his creation, his ticket to a better life. Unable to cope, Snider's behavior turned erratic. Friends recalled how he would brag about Dorothy's success in one breath and curse her name in the next. He began showing up unannounced, making scenes at her photo shoots, and leaving threatening messages when she didn't answer his calls. The once promising promoter was now a looming shadow over Dorothy's bright future. How long could Dorothy walk this tightrope, balancing her burgeoning career with the dangerous ties of her past? Was there still a way out, or had Snider already tightened the noose? As Dorothy's relationship with Peter Bogdanovich deepened, her ties to Snider grew more fragile. Peter, a respected director, offered her not only love but also a sense of safety. Unlike Snider, Peter viewed her as an equal, a muse, not a possession. Dorothy found solace in his gentle demeanor, a stark contrast to Snider's increasingly volatile behavior. She confided in Peter about her fears, revealing the extent of Snider's control. She spoke of his manipulations, his threats, and the gut-wrenching feeling of being watched. Peter urged her to sever ties, to take the step toward a new life where Snider's voice was just a distant echo. But breaking free was not as simple as it seemed. Dorothy began distancing herself, making plans to finalize the separation. She moved in with Peter, her laughter returning, but with a new fragility. She was cautious, double-checking locks and looking over her shoulder. She knew Snider was not the type to let go without a fight. His messages shifted from pleas to ultimatums, his voice laced with menace. The people around her saw the cracks forming. Friends noticed how she would drift off mid-conversation, her mind caught in a labyrinth of fear and indecision. Dorothy wanted freedom, but she also knew that confronting Snider meant walking into a lion's den. What happens when the price of escape is a face-to-face with danger? And can love truly protect against the rage of a man who feels he has lost everything? On August 14, 1980, Dorothy agreed to meet Snider. She had hoped this final conversation would bring closure, allowing her to move on with her life. She wore a calm mask, but beneath it, every step felt like walking on thin ice. Friends warned her, their voices echoing in her mind. She reassured them, "I'll be fine." Snider's home was a maze of memories. Pictures of them together still adorned the walls, a twisted shrine to a life that no longer existed. He greeted her with an unsettling calm, his eyes betraying a storm within. The conversation started civilly, but as the minutes ticked by, Snider's demeanor shifted. He accused her of betrayal, of abandoning him when he needed her most. Dorothy remained composed, but her instincts screamed danger. As she stood to leave, the world seemed to slow. Snider moved swiftly, the gun in his hand as cold as his expression. Dorothy's final moments were a mix of shock and terror, a life filled with promise, extinguished in an instant. When the police arrived, they found a scene too horrifying to describe. Snider had not only killed Dorothy, but had also turned the weapon on himself, creating a grim tableau of obsession and tragedy. Could anyone have stopped this? Were the signs there all along, and if so, why were they ignored until it was too late? The news of Dorothy Stratten's murder rippled through Hollywood like a shockwave. Her death was not just a tragic headline, it was a gut punch to an industry already haunted by stories of exploitation and broken dreams. Friends, family, and fans struggled to reconcile the vibrant young woman they knew with the cold reality of her violent end. The contrast between her glowing photos in Playboy and the dark details of her death added a haunting layer to her legacy. Peter Bogdanovich was devastated. He had not only lost a lover but also a muse, a light that had brought warmth into his life. His grief was palpable, a wound that refused to close. He withdrew from the public eye, his sorrow manifesting in ways that friends described as both heartbreaking and unsettling. He dedicated his work to her memory, pouring his emotions into films that subtly echoed his loss. Playboy founder Hugh Hefner also expressed his sorrow, publicly mourning the loss of Dorothy. However, beneath the condolences, a narrative began to emerge, one that criticized the culture Dorothy had been pulled into. Some argued that the world of Playboy, with its blurred lines and seductive promises, had placed her in the orbit of dangerous men. The press had a field day. Sensational headlines and lurid speculation painted Dorothy as a tragic beauty in a cautionary tale. Her story became the subject of television movies and documentaries, each retelling casting a slightly different shadow on the events. But amid the noise, a central truth remained. Dorothy had tried to break free, but the chains of her past had been too tight. Was Dorothy just another victim of Hollywood's darker side, or did her story reveal deeper cracks in a society that often glamorizes dangerous relationships until it's too late? To understand how a man could murder the woman he once loved, it is essential to look into Paul Snider's psyche. His life was marked by a need for control over his image, his career, and ultimately, over Dorothy. Snider was not just an opportunist, he was a predator with a fragile ego. Those who knew him described a man who oscillated between charismatic and chillingly manipulative. Snider's identity had become so entwined with Dorothy's success that her independence felt like an existential threat. His world revolved around her, not out of love, but out of necessity. As Dorothy pulled away, the void in his life expanded, filling with rage and desperation. His attempts to reconcile were not about forgiveness but about reclaiming what he saw as his property. Experts in criminal psychology pointed to a pattern of abusive behavior. Snider exhibited classic traits of coercive control, a form of abuse where the abuser micromanages every aspect of their victim's life. He isolated Dorothy, manipulated her decisions, and, when all else failed, resorted to violence. His final act was not a loss of control, but the ultimate assertion of it, a tragic and irreversible claim over Dorothy's life. What drives a person to such extremes? Is it merely jealousy, or does it stem from a darker, more profound inability to accept loss and change? Dorothy's death raised difficult questions about the culture she had been drawn into. The Playboy lifestyle, with its promise of glamour and success, often masked a harsher reality. Many women who entered that world found themselves navigating a labyrinth of expectations, required to be seductive but pure, independent, yet completely available. The industry had turned Dorothy into a symbol, a dream girl for millions, but in doing so, it also stripped away layers of her humanity. Behind the iconic photo shoots and the mansion's walls, there was a young woman struggling with the pressures of fame and the shadows of her past. Dorothy was not the first, nor would she be the last, to find that the cost of the spotlight could be deadly. Critics argued that Dorothy's vulnerability had been amplified by an industry that profits from the fantasies it sells. The tragedy was not just that Dorothy died, but that she had felt cornered, isolated, unable to find a way out of the web spun around her. Her death became a catalyst for discussions about the treatment of women in Hollywood, highlighting the thin line between admiration and exploitation. Were the warning signs there all along? And if so, why did a world so obsessed with Dorothy's beauty fail to see the dangers closing in around her? Dorothy Stratten's story did not end with her death. Her legacy continued to influence those who knew her and those who learned of her through films, documentaries, and articles. She became a symbol of lost potential, a reminder of how fragile life can be when innocence collides with cruelty. Peter Bogdanovich went on to write a book about Dorothy, The Killing of the Unicorn, in which he not only memorialized her, but also criticized the culture that had failed her. His grief was a living wound, influencing his work and personal life for years to come. Other women who had been through similar experiences found solace in Dorothy's story, using it as a cautionary tale to navigate their own paths more cautiously. Dorothy's tale became a lesson in the importance of listening to those who feel trapped, of offering support before the walls close in. Her story encouraged discussions on domestic abuse, manipulative relationships, and the hidden dangers behind closed doors. She may have been silenced too soon, but the echoes of her life continued to resonate, guiding others towards safety and strength. Can one story truly change the course of how society views abuse and control, or does history risk repeating itself when the lessons are forgotten? Dorothy's story inspired numerous retellings, each attempting to capture the blend of beauty and tragedy that defined her life. The film Star 80, directed by Bob Fosse, portrayed her story with a stark and unsettling realism. Critics praised the film for its unflinching look at control and obsession, but it also reignited debates about whether Hollywood was capitalizing on her death. Dorothy's life became a narrative woven into the broader tapestry of true crime stories. Her face, forever frozen in youthful beauty, became a haunting reminder of the dangers lurking beneath glamour. But as with many true crime tales, the balance between honoring the victim and sensationalizing the tragedy was delicate. Is it possible to share a story like Dorothy's with respect and authenticity? Or does the line between tribute and exploitation blur when the cameras start rolling? In the aftermath of Dorothy Stratten's murder, Paul Snider never faced a court of law. His final act, a bullet meant for himself, ensured that he evaded justice by traditional means. His death left a lingering sense of injustice, a closed case that offered no closure. For Dorothy's loved ones, there was no satisfaction, no moment in a courtroom where the truth could be fully aired. Law enforcement officials pieced together the tragic timeline of Dorothy's final hours, reconstructing the moments of horror inside that small house in West Los Angeles. The evidence told a clear story. Snider had meticulously planned the encounter. The gun he purchased days before, the lock on the door, the silenced phone, all pointed to a crime of premeditation. The community grappled with the reality that someone like Snider could have slipped through the cracks. His history of manipulation and control was evident to those who had known him closely, yet he had managed to disguise his intentions until it was too late. His final act of murder-suicide became a symbol of ultimate control, the last word in a relationship defined by dominance and fear. Dorothy's death prompted discussions on the importance of recognizing the signs of coercive control and abuse. Advocates called for better support systems for individuals in dangerous relationships, emphasizing that leaving an abusive partner is often the most perilous moment. Dorothy had tried to build a future beyond Snider's reach, but the system had not been equipped to offer the protection she needed. In a world that often turns tragedy into spectacle, how do we ensure that Dorothy's story is remembered for its lessons, not just for its shock value? Dorothy Stratten's story is more than a tale of fame and tragedy. It is a stark reminder of the dangers that can hide behind love and admiration. Her life was filled with promise, but her death underscored the harsh reality faced by many trapped in manipulative relationships. If Dorothy's story resonates with you, let it serve as a call to remain vigilant, to support those who feel isolated, and to advocate for stronger protections against coercive control. At True Crime Acts, we believe in shedding light on stories like Dorothy's, not just to recount the past, but to spark change in the present. If you or someone you know is in a dangerous situation, reach out for help. Resources and support are available. If you found this story thought-provoking and important, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Stay connected with us as we continue to uncover the stories that need to be told, amplifying voices that deserve to be heard, and challenging the silence that too often surrounds these tragedies. Do you think enough has been done to protect those in controlling relationships? Or is there still more to be learned from Dorothy's tragic story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective could make a difference.